Someone left in the comments, people can never be free, healthy, and happy until they stop caring about what others think or say about them. Do you agree with that?
Um, I don't put that much weight into what other people think, whether or not I care what they think or not. So I don't think I have put that much thought into.
I know it's a very deep comment. I do think, though, it has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today because the fear of what people would think of me made me think ahead since I was a kid
Yeah.
growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I did think that it made sense growing up as a teenager, even as a kid, because I knew I was not going to be happy where I was in my hometown. So I always was planning ahead.
Yeah, I get you. I remember playing ahead since I can remember. I think it's going to be an interesting topic, maybe a little bit more serious than some of the other things we've talked about. So I'm going to try and keep it a little lighthearted, at least on my perspective of what sort of forced me to be such a planner. And of course, this is just our perspective. Not every person who is LGBTQ plus
Right.
is
Yeah.
going to consider themselves a planner. You don't have to live your life this way. I just think for me, it was
Yeah.
beneficial to really plan ahead, mainly due to the fact that I was insecure in my surroundings, insecure in my environment. And I also saw people around me who were not planning for the future, and I
Mm-hmm.
saw what happened to them along the way. So, very excited to talk about this. It's gonna be
Yeah.
interesting.
Do you remember the first time that you planned something ahead or planning ahead as a kid?
I don't know why, but for some reason this goes back to I think something we've already talked about in the past. When I was younger, I oftentimes would play with, action figures or dolls or toys or stuffed animals, and they would always be very transient. They could move around anywhere.
Uh-huh.
They would like pack all their stuff in their car. They'd be
Right.
able to like unload it and load it quickly. Kind of having this freedom and ability to get into a different
Mm-hmm.
environment whenever the environment they were in was no longer hospitable. And I think this
Yes.
comes from the fact that I moved around a lot as a kid, so I kind of had that in the back of my head. Also, the environment that I was in would often get a little chaotic. My
Mm-hmm.
mom was not, in my opinion, a great relationship with my dad or with my stepdad. Not that there was ever physical violence or anything that absurd. It was more so just a more mental and emotional
Yeah.
games that were being played and lots of drama. And so I always felt like I needed to have multiple plans. Like I
Mm-hmm.
needed to have a plan B, a plan C, a
C,
plan D.
D.
I
Yeah.
think that was kind of my first introduction into planning
Yeah.
ahead. It was having multiple plans and
Yeah.
multiple scenarios that I could prepare for.
Me too. I feel like I always wanted to have a preparation, and I do remember always being organized with my stuff. My room was always neat and clean, and always wanted to organize all my toys
Yeah.
and the things that I had because I knew that was important to me in the future, maybe because I wanted to keep that organization because that's probably one of the things that if you're planning ahead, you need to be organized as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree. I was one of those kids as well that liked my room to be a certain way. This stuff goes over here, this stuff goes over there. I also really like to take care of my things because if something was mine, I wanted to take care of it. I
Yes.
wanted it to last. And so I was always very particular about my things. I think being an only child also kind of helped me to protect my stuff. No one was coming in
Right.
my room to attack it, so to speak.
And also having a notebook to write ideas and plan ahead for the next day, I think that also helped me. I love to write it down, what I wanted to do, my to-do list since growing up. And then teenager, I was in that environment that I wanted to escape so bad because everyone around me was straight. I wanted to leave my hometown so bad. So I knew that I needed to do better in school. I knew I needed good grades. I knew I needed to go somewhere else because most of the people that were in my class, they were going to college that were in my hometown or an hour away from my hometown.
Yeah.
So I knew that that was not going to be my future. I wanted something else. I wanted to literally the word escape.
Yeah, for me as a young kid and a teenager, I always did really well in school. I didn't put much effort in, would always get A's and B's, and kind of just picked it up relatively easily. That being said, looking back, I don't think I learned anything because I
No.
was just kind of getting through the tests. But one of the things that I realized throughout school, because I was gifted enough to go to a private school,
Hmm.
which one of the pluses was I was around a lot of kids that came from money, so their parents
Right.
expected them to do really
Right.
well, expected them to get a higher
Hmm.
education so that they can continue on the sort of path that they were
Hmm.
on. I came from a relatively uneducated family. My parents graduated high school but did not go to college. My stepdad was a pharmacist, so he had gone to college, and he was really the example for me on why I needed to get a higher education so I could support myself. And so it was kind of those later high school years when I was like, oh goodness, I know I'm going to college because that was for sure. And
Right.
I mean, in 2007, 8, I think in general, it was very
Everyone's
important that
going to go to
most, yeah,
college.
most kids go to college. And so that was already in my path. My parents didn't really care what I did for a
Right.
living. They just wanted me to go to
Mm-hmm.
school. And so it was my stepdad and his career in healthcare that I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I should pursue.
Right.
He's, got a good job. He works decent hours, consistent paycheck. It's interesting. I love health and science. You get to help people. And so I started to put those pieces together that maybe I would become something in the healthcare field. I had friends in high school too who would be like, "Oh, I'm going to be a radiologist. Oh, I'm going to be an endodontist." All these careers that I had never even heard of. And so I started really kind of starting to piece together what my life was going to look like outside of school. And at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like you're mentioning, all these sexuality questions
Mm-hmm.
are coming into play, and me realizing that I have depended so much on
Yeah.
my family for so long. If I was to come out, would that change our
Interfere anything.
interactions? And
Mm-hmm.
of course, I've had little slip ups here and there where my parents were super inflamed by the concept of me being gay. I'm not really sure why. I had Britney Spears posters all over my room. Well, maybe they thought I was interested in her. But I would also perform to Britney Spears in front of my parents.
Maybe they pretend that they didn't know.
They pretended that they didn't know, and then they just wanted to wait until I, told them so they could then unleash on me,
Yeah.
right? Because then it's not their fault. They're not guilty, right? They didn't allow me to live this
Yeah.
lifestyle or pursue it. I'm the one who's coming to them, and it was very interesting now to look back at that sort of perspective because you're right. They knew, they denied it, and waited for me to be confident enough to say it to then try to tear me down in the process.
It's interesting that we have a very similar background. I also went to a private school where the kids, their parents were lawyers, doctors, engineers, the mayor of the city. And I always knew that if I didn't plan ahead, if I didn't make a project, a goal for myself and for my future, I was not gonna be nobody. I was not gonna leave my town. I was gonna be an average, gonna have an average job, not happy with myself because there, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be out. I will probably try to blend in as much as I could, but I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to escape from
Yeah.
that reality. For them, it was easy. They could do anything they want. They could live outside of the country if they want. They could live in a different state if they want. Their parents would pay for their bills. But for me, I knew I had to work for it. I knew I had to do above and beyond to accomplish something or to be happy as a gay male.
Yeah, I look back too very similarly to people who were in a similar situation to me. I grew up, middle class, maybe lower middle class. I was an only child, so the benefits of being an only child is that there's more money around. So I
Mm-hmm.
was able to do certain things that maybe my friends couldn't afford to
Right.
do, just because I was the only one. And so I remember my plan was really just to kind of be under the radar and try to figure out how I could live my sexuality and still sort of depend on my parents as best as possible. And that was really flourishing because my mom, my stepdad decided to move to South Florida
Mm-hmm.
and they were going to keep their house where we lived in Jacksonville. So I ended up living there from like 18, 19, 20 while I was in my, first couple years of college by myself. And so I had this
Wow.
house to myself and I felt very independent. Was like, okay, this is actually not that
Mm-hmm.
bad. Years before, I was constantly thinking I need to go somewhere else for school. I was looking at University of Central Florida in Orlando, where I spent a lot of time, or Miami. And it also was that time where my mom was like, "Oh, that's going to cost you money."
Right.
And I always anticipated that my parents were going to kind of help me
Afford.
afford where I was going to
Yeah.
live in college because they had never mentioned this before. It was always
Right.
they had paid for me to go to private school. It was going to literally be the same cost to pay for me an apartment somewhere.
Money was never the problem.
Yeah, it seemed that way.
Yeah.
But what happened was when I turned 21, I was in college in Jacksonville, and my mom and stepdad decided to get a divorce. Well, when
Wow.
you're lower middle class or middle class and your mom doesn't work and your stepdad is the breadwinner and they get
Wow.
divorced, but the fact that we had a boat, two mortgages, cars, money was coming in, but
Mm-hmm.
it was being dispersed immediately. There
Yeah.
was no savings, there was no
A
nothing.
lot of
So,
spending.
right. So when they got divorced, everything got ripped apart like overnight. And I was also in Jacksonville. I had been here my whole life, and I needed to create a plan immediately that would still be able to use the things that I had worked towards up until this point, but allow me to find some independence, take care of myself and my mom, at least in my head at the time. I thought that was going to be the goal. And that's what really pushed me forward into submitting more of myself into education and
Mm-hmm.
creating this long term goal of like, what are you going to do to support yourself? at the same time too, about, a couple years later, I was in medical school and decided to finally come out to my mom, and that's where our relationship, where had always been okay,
Mm-hmm.
really took a downturn.
Wow.
And so I was really fortunate enough to be on my own 2 feet at that time. But, looking back, even then, I feel like I was such a planner. But sometimes now I'm reflecting and thinking, man, I could have planned even better.
Yeah, I feel the same way. In 2016, I lost my dad and my family, my mom, my sisters. We had no preparation. He died so young. He was 48. He died of a heart attack very soon, very suddenly, and we didn't know how to move forward. We didn't have a plan. He was the breadwinner. We had no job. My mom had no job, and we just had to figure it out on our own. It
Mhm.
was obviously something that we didn't plan, but I think that in that moment particular of my life, I was 20 years old, that helped me to look at the future in a different perspective. After that, obviously, that became a trauma. I always was trying to think of plan A, B, C, and D,
Mhm.
because even though growing up and being a teenager, thinking ahead, being queer, always trying to have an escape plan, that was what changed my life forever. Because after that, I know I always need to have a backup plan for everything in life.
Yeah, it's very similar to me as well. I thought at the time that I was finally coming out to my mom, I had ensured that I was financially
Hmm.
independent. I was in a place where I could continue my education on my own. If it didn't go well, I didn't necessarily depend on her anymore. And there were many aspects of my brain that thought, that's not great. You should probably tell her earlier. It's better to be honest and upfront right away when you are trying to navigate this process. And I felt like I was deceiving her a lot, which of course we've talked about lying here a
Hmm.
lot. When you're gay, you're so used to hiding things and lying, it becomes to wear on you in multiple stages of your life.
Yeah.
And I decided, and multiple times, to not say anything because even though me and my mom had a relatively good relationship, I always thought there was this little chance that she could take it poorly and she could
Wow.
pull the rug out from
Hmm.
underneath me. Luckily, she never necessarily did that. But again, when I told her I was gay, our relationship never repaired.
Changed.
Even to this day, it's always been different. And I look back and think it's great that I planned to not say it until I was in a financially and personally and environmentally stable position. And I think that's a lot of us when we're gay have to think about, like, what is our plan going to be? Are we going to be in a good position? Are we going to be safe? Because we rely on our family so much in a
Yes.
capacity that straight people do too, but they're never put in the situation that your family could turn away from you just because of your sexuality.
Yeah, it's something that we have to deal with. It's something that we have to deal since growing up.
Hmm.
And we always have to think constantly, oh, people are gonna accept me for who I am. Is the society gonna reject me? Are they gonna be homophobic if I showed up at work and be just normal, just be myself?
Hmm.
So we always have those things in the back of our heads. Are people gonna be accepting? Are people gonna be supportive? We don't know. We don't know those answers. It's a question, it's a doubt. And for us planners, questions are not a good thing. We want to have a plan, a to-do list.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing that I considered as well. Growing up in 2006, 7, 8, watching the financial collapse
Yes.
happen around me, I also had figured out what to plan for in the future in regards to what type of career I wanted to do. I always love architecture. I always love
Ah,
design and
yes.
drawing. I like real estate. I love talking to
Mm-hmm.
people. I would love to have been in a situation where I thought that would have been a good career for me. And it is a good career. But at the time, because of the financial collapse and the housing market,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's not going to work for you.
Right.
Okay, fitness and health are my other two passions. How do I combine them? So then I pursued pharmacy initially
Mm-hmm.
because my stepdad, again, being a pharmacist, and I personally did not think I was smart enough to be a doctor. I didn't think that it was a potential even option for me. And no one had ever said you could be a doctor,
Right.
and no one had ever really supported me in that way. So I took the pharmacy entrance exam, did really well, shadowed my stepdad, realized standing at a pharmacy for 12 hours was just not the tea and was not going to work for me. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll be a nurse
Right.
because I would rather be spending more time
Mm-hmm.
doing things physically and interacting with patients. I would like more of an ability to learn and to add into my career. Nursing, I felt like was always more changing and
Right.
evolving, and there's a lot of education there. I love to learn. So then I pursued that. My partner at the time, he was a nurse, and he was actually the only person who told me, you should be a doctor. You could do more than this. I
Wow.
have faith that you could do anything you wanted to do. Maybe I'm overstating that. He didn't quite say that. But in my head at the time, because I was starving for someone to encourage me, it felt like the first push
Right.
that I got that
Light
someone
bulb.
said I could do something. The same week, literally, we got in a massive argument because we were literally fighting like every other day. And I got online and started to plan my
Wow.
career in medicine. And it was all because of an argument and the same person who supported me just a few days before.
Thanks to your toxic relationship. Look
All
at you
my
now.
toxic relationships from dad, mom, boyfriend. Luckily, I'm an only child because I can only imagine what my brothers or sisters would have done to me.
For me, there was this movie that I watched 18, 19 years old, right before getting to college. It's a Wonderful Life. It's a
Yes.
classic Christmas movie. And in that movie, the guy, the character, he wants to travel the world, see everything, and experience everything. But his dad passed away, and then he has to take care of the business. And I watched this movie, and that stayed with me for so long because I did not want it to stay in my hometown. I did not want it to be stuck there forever
Right.
and seeing my high school friends and the people that I always knew forever because I wanted to be gay, queer, loud, and proud. I wanted to see the world. And after my dad passed, I was like, oh no, it's happening. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to take care of the business.
Yeah.
And this was not something that I wanted to do. So I was already in college when that happened, so I decided to plan ahead and escape.
Yeah.
That's why I did. I came to America at 20 years old. And after that, there was not much planning ahead. I just wanted to get out.
Hmm.
And after that, I just didn't know what to do next. But I felt like all those years of planning ahead and being organized as a child that propelled me to move to a different country, to adapt to a different culture, to speak a different language, because none of those things I excel at. And it was a big change for me. And that was kind of like the period of your life that you're talking about. So that's another thing that we share in common, those life experience that happen after high school and before college
Hmm.
that change our life forever.
Yeah, that's very similar to me. I wanted to escape Jacksonville, which is so funny because this is where we live now. But I had been here my whole life and I wanted to get out of this toxic relationship, get away from my parents, try to find myself a little bit. So entering into medical school was probably the most overwhelming and encompassing and life-changing things I could have ever done, mainly because it really showed me my potential and what I could do. And I think we all have this potential in us, but
Hmm.
sometimes we need something to kind of light the fire
Yeah.
and push you. So I remember starting school. I remember it was the first time that I had actually read a textbook cover to cover. It was the first
Wow.
time I was actually putting energy and effort into studying because when you're in med school, when you get there, fine, great,
Yeah.
pay the tuition, take the tests. If you don't pass your board exams, bye. It's a
Yeah.
waste. There's actually an article I read while I was in medical school. It was something along the lines of your waiter has a medical degree.
Hmm.
And the reason is because you can get a medical degree here in the United States or anywhere around the world, but if you don't pass your board exams and then get into a residency, it's all for nothing. You
Wow.
have to do a residency in the United States for a minimum of 3 years to be able to practice medicine here. And so the problem is there are 45 to 50,000 people who apply for residencies all over the world here in the United States,
Crazy.
and there's maybe 18,000 slots, maybe less. And so you're competing against a massive amount of people. And that pressure was the first time that I had ever truly felt that much on my back on my own, you
Because you
know?
knew if you came back home, you had nothing, right?
Yes.
But other kids that are in med school, they have everything. They have their parents paying the bills. They don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, I remember being in school too, and I was so broke. I was living, of course, on student loans. I would like text my mom a very nice message because again, our relationship was not the best, and she was always actually very helpful. And remember, I know you know this story because she brings it up to this day. She has all the receipts, but she would send me 20 or $40 so I could
To
go to
eat.
the little convenience store and buy peanut butter and jelly and ramen noodles,
Wow.
which is crazy because growing up, that was never my
Right.
lifestyle. I was always, taken care of very well by my family. They did well. And so to have that transition occur
Yeah.
when you're 21 at the same time in medical school,
But
it was wild.
like you said, all those things, they are important for us to become a bigger person
Mhm.
and to make us accomplish things, greater things in life.
Yeah, and I think too, what I really learned is that if you're unhappy with your particular environment, there are options to always
Yes.
better yourself and to push yourself out of it. Whether that means that
Mm-hmm.
you are alone at 13 in your bedroom and you're realizing your sexuality and you know how your family's going to respond, or maybe that means you are in high school and you don't get along with anyone or fit in with anyone. Or maybe that means you're in college and you're dealing with a lot of crazy stuff that you're not quite ready for as an
Any kind
adult.
of situation, I feel like we human, we are always afraid of the risk,
Hmm.
afraid of, oh, what if it goes wrong, right? But if you had the mentality and I had this mentality, maybe we would have never met. So here we are talking about things that we learned of the past and things that were important for us in those moments of our lives. For you, you had a very toxic relationship, but somehow that conversation that you had with your ex-boyfriend that made you open your mind and look for a change.
Right, all the pieces sometimes are right in front of us, and we just need to figure out sort of how to put them together. In the
Yeah.
same week, I was being encouraged by the same person that I was trying to get away from. And so I think a lot of us are risk averse. I certainly am. I'm not interested in trying to put everything on the line, but that's where planning comes in. That's where
Yes.
you say, okay, I'm going to take this risk, but what's my plan A, plan B, plan C? When this one goes right, what's next? And you don't have to sit there and think about that constantly, but it should
Yeah,
be in the back of your mind. What are
absolutely.
my next steps? What are my goals?
Or where do you want to be in a year from now or 5 years from now? I think all those things are important, not for you to like write all the steps that you need to do towards that goal, but just for you to have an idea. What do you want to accomplish with your life?
Yeah, I think that's why I've gotten to where I'm at today. You know, I was in medical school and then you learn all this great information. You are sort of just taking it in almost like a fire hydrant through a
Yes.
straw. It's so much in such a short period of time. Then you get into residency and really apply it. And it's great because you're continuing to learn. And then for me, when I finished residency, I was like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Because you start a career typically with an employer. I worked at an urgent care that was owned by a massive hospital corporation, and it felt very much like a pharmacy. I was clocking in for 12-hour shifts and clocking out, and it was great to be able to help people. It just didn't feel like what I wanted. I wanted in some capacity to have more control of my life. I think that's what we all want. And especially when you're LGBTQ plus, you feel like you're so out of control, especially
Yes.
as a young person. You're
Yes.
just desperate to feel like you can drive the car.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that way. Even after all this work, I got into residency, which was my lifelong goal. And then I got this great job, which I was so blessed and still thankful for, but it just was not making me
Yeah.
happy. And I felt like a lot of my colleagues were like, well, this is the end. There's no
Right.
next step for me. And I was like, what's next?
Yeah, because most people they are comfortable where they are. They're afraid of doing the different because they're afraid of the risk. So I think it's important to tell the viewers that everything is possible if you plan ahead, if you set your goals, put in a piece of paper, just write it down, just write your ideas, what you want to
Yes.
accomplish in life. Because I feel like if you have all those goals and ideas in a piece of paper, all the decisions that you make in a day to day will lead you towards your goal, at least a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like if you're fortunate enough to have a partner or someone that you like to share these ideas with, it can be even more beneficial because you get to bounce them
Yeah.
off. And that's something we've been doing, I think, for more than 4 years now. We have multiple meetings, which is maybe a little bit extra, but we like to meet throughout the week, usually first thing in the morning, and just say, hey, what's the day going to be like? What's on our schedule? What's
Yeah.
our end goal for today? What's our end goal for the week? And that has really helped us accomplish a lot of things, both silly and serious,
Yeah.
that have, pushed us towards the things we want to do in our life. And I think that's helped us get to where we're at now as having our own business and being our own bosses. And throughout the journey, I think it's really important to understand you have to do things that you don't enjoy and you have to learn and you have to push yourself in order to get to that final goal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will ask me, oh, how did you start your own business? It's really difficult to do, especially today. 50 years ago, the majority of primary care doctors had their own
Yeah.
shack. You'd walk in, you'd bring your family, they'd see everyone, and it was just a community building
Yes.
situation and experience. And now it's just not that way. Everything is so corporate in medicine, and that is not what I wanted. I wanted to be able to build a community with my
Yeah.
patients, which I'm so fortunate to be able to do. But it didn't start there. It actually started with me at that urgent care picking up two more jobs,
Wow.
then switching to another job, picking up four other jobs. And during the pandemic, I was actually working at 8 different jobs, three of which were W-2 full-time employee. And that's because telehealth had taken off. I had strategically learned before the pandemic about telehealth, knowing it was a new opportunity. So really, I think it is the nutshell of it all is look for those opportunities
Yeah.
that are going to help you get to your end goal. You don't have to necessarily know where that is, just know where it's going, know the
Yeah.
direction. Oprah Winfrey famously says a lot of people walk around this earth with no goal. They think that they know what they want, they think they know how to get there, but they ask her all the time, what is the secret to life? What is the secret to reaching it? And you have to continue to dream. You have to have a goal and every
Yeah.
day be putting at least a little baby step towards it.
Because everything is possible. You
Everything.
literally can do anything you want in your life.
At least that's our perspective. You may
Yeah.
have a different one, and that is completely fine. You are valid, you are just, you are able to determine what is best for you and how people should live their lives in your perspective.
Yeah.
For me, for someone who likes to learn, likes to push myself, planning and being strategic in my day to day is key.
It's fundamental.
at least for what I think has
Yeah.
led me to where we're at. But what do you think? I'm sure you have opinions. Let's try to keep them nice because that's what we're here to do, build a community, be nice to one another and be kind. But what do you think about planning ahead? Maybe you're a little more spontaneous. That is great too, but we'd love to hear what has helped you get through your life. Being LGBTQ plus is very complicated.
Yes.
Starting a career when you are in a minority is a challenge. So
Yeah.
how did you navigate that? We would love to hear your perspective.
Please keep sharing your stories. We'll love to hear from you. If you haven't yet, subscribe, like, share, do what you want to do. And we are looking forward to see you on the next topic next week.
Until then,
Bye.
see ya.
Bye.